Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of the Prove Me Wrong podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Pete Lieb. I'm glad you're all on board with me today. I have yet another great show lined up for you today. I am getting extremely lucky. So we are going to test the limits of human endurance today, at least verbally, and climb the highest peak on the planet, Mount Everest. It's really a recent obsession of mine. I watched a movie, and I'm sure most of you have seen it too. It was called Everest. I think it was made in 2015, and it was based on a true story of an expedition that was summiting the mountain, and during the descent, they were caught in a storm. Several of them died, and from that point on, I was obsessed with it. I watched a ton of YouTube videos, a ton of documentary films, just trying to get inside the head of why would these individuals purposefully put themselves on a mountain with an opportunity to die. And it was just fascinating to me. So to do that today, I'm very fortunate to have author and experienced mountaineer Ellis Stewart as my guest today. And he's going to discuss his book. It's called Everest. It's not about the summit. And that's kind of why I searched him out. I wanted to see what it was about, as well as his own personal experiences with his two previous attempts to summit Everest and the circumstances that prevented that from happening. And he is also efforting now for a third attempt. So we'll get into that as well. So you can read his book. You can also find him at everest-dream.com. That's his web page, everest-dream.com. So welcome, Ellis, to the Prove Me Wrong podcast.
Thanks, Pete. It's a great pleasure to be speaking to you this evening.
So before we hit base camp, I would like to learn a little more about you personally, if I could. Can you give me a little insight into your background and how did your journey begin?
Yeah, absolutely. I started out, I guess, in a way, a lot of people move into sort of climbing, adventure mountaineering, and it's just from being a child and having a great, zest for the outdoors, and whether that's through joining your local scout troop or going away on hiking trips. It started from that, really, just from being a very relatively young age, sort of early teens. I knew that I was very interested in and very, very passionate about being in the great outdoors, as it is. Where I live in England, I was fortunate that we had a lot of areas not too far from where I was growing up. I was able to get out and explore, and it just went from there for me, really. I moved into rock climbing in my sort of late teens, and then before long I was sort of looking towards the bigger mountains, as it was. But that didn't really mountaineering as such was something that came, I guess, a little bit later in my life. It wasn't something that I was immediately able to get straight into, because it comes with there's a price tag involved in a lot of big mountaineering expeditions. So it's not a venture that you can just readily go away and do on a whim. So it was a gradual build up for me. It was just an interest that was there from childhood. And it's a funny thing, really, because whenever I've spoken about my Everest expeditions that I've been on a few years back, I mean, for a lot of people, they tend to say that an Everest expedition, as you might yourself know from sort of research you've done, that it's a 2-month expedition to climb a mountain such as Everest. But it's not really. I always say the spark to do that starts a long, long time before you even get on the plane to fly out to these mountains. So for me, I think Everest as a name, as a goal, was a 20-year dream, really. It was a 20-year spark, but as it should be for a lot of people if you look to go to one of these peaks.
So I'm very interested in the overall process. I know you had said it was kind of a lifelong dream. How does that? How does the actual process start? I know you said there was a price tag involved, and that was something else that people would pay to put themselves in that spot. That was really, again, I had a lot of things playing in my brain, and I'm thinking, wow, these people paid to put themselves in a life and death situation. So can you give me and the listening audience who haven't been there kind of an understanding of how does that start from day one? And what is the process in terms of the timeline of the entire journey?
Okay, so I mean, We'll talk about Everest. That's obviously what your interest is, and that's obviously where I'm coming from here as well. Everest is a mountain that's kind of out there on its own in regards to costings. It's the most expensive, I think, adventure holiday I guess anybody could ever try and undertake. When you get into mountaineering, you don't straight away think about the price tag implications. You just know that you love the mountains, you love going into the hills, and it's only when you start looking into it and you look into the costs of certainly a Himalayan expedition and then getting up to Everest, which you realise is actually a colossal amount of money. I mean, I personally became very aware of the costs of Everest and similar peaks after the Into Thin Air. Really, I guess was the book that opened the eyes for a lot of people into these expensive trips. I mean, so if Everest can be priced anywhere from $40,000 to I think it's $160,000 these days, depending on the bells and whistles you want to have attached to your expedition. I mean, for me personally, I was spending around about $50,000 to go out to Everest for the 2 years that I was there, and that's not an easy amount of money for the average person to come across. I mean, it's a tricky proposition just even getting to the bottom of the mountain because it's such a monumental price tag involved. So it's becoming, Everest has got that reputation as being a mountain either for the very privileged and rich and well off, or the very, very dedicated, committed individuals, which I think I came from that camp because I certainly wasn't rich, but I was very dedicated and committed to achieve this lifelong goal, really. So it's a lot of money. You've got to tackle it and break it down and put a plan and a strategy in place as how you're going to get that money together and how you're going to get out to Everest in the first place. So
you were able to fundraise and put that together and get that going. So you did your first attempt in 2014, correct?
Yes, correct.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it wasn't actually the first time I was aiming to go to the mountain. I tried to get the funding in place on multiple occasions prior to 2014. So my first attempt to go to the peak was in 2002. That didn't come off, so I tried again for 2003. That didn't come off. I think I tried again for 2007, 2011, and this is all attempts at actually getting the funding in place to even to go out to attempt the mountain. So I tried on numerous occasions to get that money together, and it was 2014 when it finally all clicked into place and I was able to go for my first attempt.
How long were you? Well, in 2014, you said that there was some type of accident that occurred that actually prevented you. Were you even able to get on the mountain in 2014?
No, not at all. I mean, it's ironic because I'd been to Everest in 2000 on a base camp trekking holiday, if you like, and stood at the bottom of the mountain for the first time. And that was a very, very low budget cost. I literally just a few bits of bobs in my backpack. I had a few £100 in my back pocket and got a plane out to Kathmandu and trekked to Everest. The same thing in 2014 cost an infinite amount more money. So we didn't actually get onto the mountain because of the events that happened lower down on a stretch of the mountain, which effectively shut the mountain down for 2014. So all climbing teams that were out there, nobody actually got on the peak that year because of the event, obviously the incident that happened in the icefall.
What happened? Were you able to say?
Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, it's all wrote about in the book I wrote about it anyway. So it's a very well-known fact. Anybody who follows along with Everest and mountaineering expeditions will certainly be aware of what happened. It's basically it was early in the season, so climbers were starting to arrive at base camp. We were one such team who were only a day away from reaching base camp. So at this time on the mountain itself, you've literally got the local workforce. So you've got Sherpas, Tibetans, you've got the Nepalis, essentially, that are load carrying through the mountain, through the icefall, taking gear and equipment up to the higher camps. And it was in the icefall where there was a congregation of around 25 of these mountain workers had actually stopped. A section of in the icefall, you have to use aluminium ladders to cross these crevasses that are naturally there.
Yeah.
So one of these ladders had actually had broken, had come loose. So they were waiting for a replacement ladder to come up from Gorak Shep, which is one of the Sherpa villages down just near base camp. So while that was happening, these guys had stopped, took the packs off, just resting, chatting, drinking, and they were pretty much in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then a large serac on the west shoulder that was directly above them decided to just break free at that exact moment. And thousands of pounds worth of ice and rock the size of a mansion just came crashing down onto the route. And of the 25 that were there, 16 were unfortunately killed. 3 were never recovered. So it became, in 2014, that one incident became the most deadly event in the mountain's history, with the single largest loss of life. And from my point of view, as I say, I was on my way into the mountain. So I was a day from reaching base camp when this actually happened. So we then sat around at base camp for a week, wondering what was happening. Did we still want to climb the mountain? Obviously, under those circumstances, were the Sherpas still happy to go on the mountain? And the whole thing was a very, very tense period of the waiting game. And ultimately, the decision was made to close the mountain down that year. There was other reasons at play. Some of the younger Sherpas who were working with the Nepalese who were working on the mountain decided to use the event to put some demands onto the Nepalese government about better working conditions on the mountain, and it kind of like a political hijacking effectively closed the mountain, and an appalling tragedy as well. Got the mountain shut down in 2014. So yeah, I went back home from spending 4 weeks in Nepal, having not actually stepped foot on the mountain because of the avalanche that happened in the icefall.
So in 2015, you're actually able to touch the mountain. At least you're able to be there. Yes, yeah. I mean,
the thing with Everest, I think, because it's such a big time-consuming project in somebody's life. I think when you get yourself into a position where you're pretty much Everest shape, you're fit and healthy, you've trained, you've prepared yourself to go out to the mountain, you've done the prerequisite experience, you feel ready and prepared. And I think you've got to keep the wheels of that wagon rolling. For me to come home in 2014, I knew if I was going to ever do this thing that I had to just get it done and immediately return and not lose any momentum. And I was lucky enough that I was able to do that in 2015. The Nepalese government had honoured our climbing permits from 2014, so I was sat on a $10,000 jump start, if you like, to return to the mountain in 2015. I mean, all of the cost of 2014 was gone because none of it was recoverable. So I didn't have a trip cancellation policy as it was on your insurance. So it was, $45,000 for a 3-week trekking holiday, effectively, is what it became. As it did for a lot of the other Western climbers who'd headed out there. So in 2015, I just knew that I felt like I hadn't had a chance. So I wanted to, try and get back to the mountain as quick as I could. I went on I didn't need to pay as much to go back in 2015. So I was quite lucky from that point of view. The team that I was there, the company that I was there with in 2014 made it sort of sweeter for me to return in 2015. So it wasn't as big a financial outlay, although it still was quite expensive. But yeah, it all came together, and I was able to return to Nepal 12 months later.
So you mentioned that you had done, you got yourself in shape and you had taken the appropriate prerequisites. Are there qualifying conditions to make the climb? Are there things that you have to do first before you're allowed to climb?
Sadly not. I think when it comes to Everest, I think it's fair to say that I think the bottom line is purely it's finances. I think if you have, if you've got the money, you're determined enough that you want to do this, you will find a company that's prepared to take that money off you and take you to Everest. Luckily, I think the mountain's not regulated. I mean, the last several years has seen a lot of incidents on the mountain, which is making people cry out for legislation on this peak. But I'm one of them. I believe that things should be done to make the mountain a safer bet for most climbers. But unfortunately, there's a lot of companies out in Nepal now who are setting up their own sort of guiding companies where they're willing to, they can undercut some of the Western companies and charge effectively $25,000-$30,000, which is half the price of the Western guiding companies. So because that's been happening, a lot of the experienced climbers have been going out to the mountain. And it's basically it's a sign of inexperience. And these new companies that are charging low costs has been leading to a lot of the problems on the mountain.
Yeah, that's really that's concerning even more to me. Really, any athletic endeavor, like let's just say the Boston Marathon, the New York Marathon, a lot of those things, they all have qualifying targets. You have to be in this, you have to hit these prerequisites first. And it seems like something like that where I don't know what the number is, but a good percentage of people who try it perish. They die if they don't do it correctly. If you aren't in perfect shape and ready to go and have the appropriate experience level, that seems really reckless. That they would, I would agree with you with some regulation.
Yeah. I mean, it's like anything in life. I think the companies that offer the better safety margins are the more expensive of the companies. So if you got $70,000 to put to an Everest expedition, and you want to do it the right way, you'll go out, you'll arm yourself with experience, you'll spend many years in the mountains, you'll be a very confident mountaineer, confident in your own abilities, and you're going to spend that much money on a climbing trip. You want to make sure you get it right, so you'll go with the companies that are guaranteeing a much higher chance of success, better planning, better logistics, better team management effectively. So you can do that, and you can spend that money with these Western companies and pretty much be confident that there's a reasonable chance that you're going to be successful. If you don't have the money, if you don't have the proper planning and preparation, then, as I said earlier, you just put your $20,000-$30,000 into the mix and just take your chances and see what happens. And sadly, that's what's been playing out for the last few years.
So you said earlier that you spent 4 weeks in 2014 and never actually touched the mountain, in reality. How long of a process? I know there are several base camps and you have to acclimate, right? So you have to acclimate to the altitude. How long would that process take to summit?
The actual summit phase on Everest is a relatively short amount of time. I think the entire duration from leaving base camp to reaching the summit and then getting back down to base camp would be around about 6 days. But to get yourself into a position to do that, you're going to spend 3 to 4 weeks of moving slowly up and down the mountain, and giving yourself, as you mentioned, giving your body time to acclimatize to the altitude. From landing in Kathmandu, you'd fly into Lukla, which is the mountain village, and then from there you begin about a week's trek up to Everest, just increasing in height very slowly each day. So it's a gradual process. So you need to, on an Everest expedition, most people generally would need to clear their intros for around about 8 weeks and expect to be out of the country for 2 to 4 months. Certainly around about 6 weeks on Everest itself is about the norm these days. And that includes about 3 to 4 weeks of acclimatizing, maybe a few more days of dropping back down a bit lower to give your body time to rest, and then go back when you're feeling ready to go for your summit bid. Once you've been to a certain height, that's when you would then begin that, as I say, that 6-day rotational phase of heading up to the summit. So it's a long time. It's certainly a 5 to 6 week minimum operation to try and reach the top of the mountain.
So in 2015, you were able to make it. You're able to at least get there to the mountain. Another something else happens to you in 2015 that again prevents you from reaching the summit. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, sure. That was the 2015 was one of those interesting years where, coming off the back of what was the most disastrous season in the mountain's history, I think it was safe to assume that 2015 was going to be a fairly incident-free year. And, statistics being statistics, that there wasn't, lightning doesn't strike twice, as it is. So I went to Everest relatively confident that it was going to be a much better year, that, I wasn't successful the previous year. But this year, hopefully, things would pan out and it would be a much, much better year. But Mother Nature decided otherwise. So everything was going hunky-dory. Everything was going fine. The mountain was, it looked in fine form. The season was progressing well. Climbers were starting to move up and down the mountain. We'd already been up the mountain. We'd had one foray up through the icefall, because what had happened in 2015, that the climb route through the Congo icefall, which is the section of the mountain straight out of base camp. You've got probably one of the most infamous parts of the entire route. This Kumbu icefall. It's effectively it's like a living, breathing, frozen waterfall of giant blocks of ice. Some of them, as I say, the size of mansions and houses. It's constantly on the move, and you've got to negotiate a safe passage through this thing to get up to Camp 1. So in 2014, the route was moved more. Sorry, in 2015, the route was moved more into the centre, away from the danger area, which was on its left-hand side, because that's where the seracs that were up on Everest West Shoulder were looming dangerously. So the route was moved over to the middle. So climbers were confident that everything was in order. And we'd already been up there. As I said, we'd already been up through the ice to have a look into the climb size. And then on our second journey back through the ice, we were on our way up to Camp 1, where we planned on staying on the mountain a little bit longer. That's when, effectively all hell broke loose, when Nepal, or the Great Kathmandu area, was struck by a large-scale earthquake, which, unbeknownst at the time, that's actually what happened. We were up on the mountain. Obviously, the mountainside started to shake, and it was a traumatic experience ensued. Base camp was completely and utterly obliterated by an avalanche and a load of rock that came down from a mountain on the opposite side of base camp. Myself and my climbing team members were avalanched in the icefall, but luckily we were able to recover from that and move up to Camp 1, where we just didn't know what was happening, and didn't know what had just happened. And it's while we were up there that we obviously got news that it was an earthquake, and that the bigger picture was that there was a lot of people that had obviously just had perished, and we were part of a much, much bigger disaster that was playing out really in Nepal.
So you were, at that point, you were stranded there for about 48 hours or so, 2 days is what I read. Yeah, is that correct?
That's correct.
How scared were you at that point? Was that really one of the times when you think, this might be it? Is that a point where you might start feeling your own mortality a little bit?
I think so. That happened on the day previous, when I was in the ice, the earthquake hit. I just assumed what was happening was that one of the sort of the ice racks that we were on top of was just coming loose. Your mind races back to the previous year when 16 people had been killed pretty much in the exact same spot where you were. So you just automatically start telling yourself, hey, this is happening again. And your mind just goes into a sense of shutdown. I personally didn't think I was going to get out of this. I thought, I'm in probably the worst place in the world right now to be, to have something like this happening, on the side of Mount Everest. Not many people get out of the icefall when it starts to collapse. So that immediate sense of doom kicked in when the earthquake immediately hit. Once that actually subsided and we miraculously survived and were able to get up to camp, after a major earthquake, you then get a series of aftershocks. So it was 2 very, very fraught days of being up at camp, regularly avalanches anyway. So it's not one of the best places. A lot of teams bypass Camp 1 because it's penned in by 2 sides of the mountain, and it regularly spews avalanches. So it's not somewhere that you want to start spending a lot of time at anyway. But we were there for the 48 hours during this procession of aftershocks. So I think the term sitting ducks came to mind quite a
Yeah.
lot on the 2 days we were on the mountain. And yeah, you're right. I mean, you do start questioning, your mortality, and I certainly didn't think I was going to get out of it. On the second day up at Camp 1, there was an even bigger sort of aftershock than what we'd experienced immediately after the main quake, and the entire mountain shook again. That was generally when I thought this is as close to checking out as it's going to get here right now. But I'm still here to tell the story that we got through that, and it was 2 very, very tense days of playing the waiting game to see what was happening and to see if we could actually get down off the mountain.
So in terms of overall, so obviously at that point, that was the end of that attempt. How high have you been? How high have you been up the mountain?
21,000 feet, so 8,000 feet down from the summit. I mean, I've been higher than that on other mountains, but on Everest itself, it was relatively, everything sort of ended for those 2 years relatively low down. Base camp's around 17,500 feet. So when you get to base camp on Everest, you've still got 12,000 foot of mountain to actually climb.
Wow.
So it's all, in perspective, really. So from being up at Camp 1, there's still around about 8,000 foot of mountain to go to get all the way up to the top. But after the earthquake, everybody came down off the mountain. Everybody was able to get down off the mountain,
So there are literally hundreds of bodies on the mountain. Individuals who were in great shape, motivated, mountaineers, experienced, and they weren't able to complete either the coming up or coming down. And what is that experience like? I'm assuming that you have seen some of those individuals in the trips up that you had made. What is it about that? I mean, is that something that is that surreal? To me, that would be surreal to be going up there, because this is a life dream for you, and to go to that spot, but at the same time, you have that realization that this was a life dream for all of them as well that I'm passing.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a big part of the whole challenge of Everest is that I've read once by a lot of climbers and I've picked up on this, but Everest itself is it's like 80% mental, only 20% physical. So I think it's getting your mindset into that way of thinking that that it's a dangerous mountain, that people have died on the mountain, there's people up there. So when you take on the challenge of Everest, I think you fully expect that there's a good chance that you are going to witness this, and you can perhaps you'll see something firsthand, such as we did in 2015. So there's a little bit of mentoring that goes on. I mean, with me and my team, we spent certainly a couple of hours in the mess tent discussing the subject of what do you do if how to deal with death on the mountain, how to deal with fatalities, or how to deal with bodies. I mean, it's a strange one, because it's a dream for a lot of people, as you said, as it was for these poor unfortunate people who unfortunately perished on the mountain. But I think everybody goes to Everest knowing there's a chance that you may not come back, but I think you calculate that risk in terms of what you perceive as your own abilities on the mountain. I personally didn't have any prior medical conditions that potentially could have, stopped me in my tracks. I mean, I'm doing my sort of due diligence, and you look at a lot of the fatalities on the mountain, on both sides of the mountain, and you break it down into why, unfortunately, people do die on this mountain. And there's a big part of it is you can avoid. It's avoidable. There's obviously the tragic things of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Right,
sure.
Such as what happened in 2014 and 2015. But a large cause of deaths on Everest is certainly preventable, and it comes down to a lack of experience, perhaps, prior medical conditions, as I've said, and falling, avalanche, just these type of things. So I think you get that into your own head, and I think if you go to the mountain, it's a case of it will not happen to me. I'm prepared. I'm fully ready to deal with anything that's going to happen, and because you don't expect it to happen. I think that's the thing. I think everybody who goes to this mountain just prays and hopes for a safe outcome. I mean, ironically, Everest is one of the safest of the 8,000 meter mountains. It's got the lowest death rate of any of the peaks. So it's.
And then you get to the point where, I think there were even so far in 2019, there have been 11 people pass away. And and you get to that gray area there, that gray morality area, and it's something I've seen a lot of and read a lot of people talking about it, where it's really a business decision. You go up with a team and you say we're a team, but when you get up to a certain level, it's every person for themselves. And in reality, you can't give too much assistance to somebody that's in distress, or it may end up costing you your life also. How do you reconcile that mentally? Just thinking, you're going up next year, how do you get yourself over that mental hurdle?
I think for me, I reconcile it by basically telling myself that, I don't think personally any human life is worth sacrificing for the attempts of standing on top of a mountain.
Right.
I think there's far more important things. So I would like to think that should I be in a position where I have to make a snap judgment or a decision, that I'll be compass mentis enough to know that I'm not going to, leave another fellow human in distress. If there's anything that I could do to help a situation, then I'd certainly try and do that. I mean, but morality is a very, very difficult thing to talk about when you're 8,000 meters up, and every single thing you do is an effort, and it's difficult. It's one of those things that we talk about and that we know can happen, and you just pray and hope it doesn't. You've got to be thinking rationally enough to make those decisions. Equally, if the same happened to me, if I was got myself into a position where it was a life or death scenario, then do you want to be left? Do you want people to step over you because they want a mantelpiece photograph of themselves on top of Everest? Or would you like to think that morality aspect would kick in, and they accept that you're another human being at the end of the day? You're no different to them. You're there just trying to achieve a dream. And if that dream goes wrong, then who's going to help you out? And who's going to, stop and think?
and that was that was one of the things that really played with my mind when I first just saw that movie. And I know the movie was a dramatization, but some things stick with you. And that was one of the ideas that stuck with me, was that, it's so, the line there is so tenuous, and maybe you aren't trying to summit at that point. Maybe you are thinking, okay, I'm going to help, but even just the act of helping may end up being something that ends up resulting in both of you passing away. And it's so that to me it really is something to think about. And I don't know, it just played on my mind for quite a bit. And I read something where there was a whole group of individuals, a team of somebody who walked past someone who was sitting there, and they said, well, nothing we can do for them now. They're up here. If we try to help them now, it could potentially hurt us. And I just thought, wow. And so I wanted to kind of get your take on it and your opinion on it, because I thought that was a really callous point of view, but I could kind of understand it.
Yeah, I mean, that particular incident you're talking about, I mean, that happened on the north side of the mountain in 2006.
Yeah.
Now it's a very well documented, event that actually happened. And I mean, that was completely wrong. And everything that happened that evening on the mountain was tragic and was awful. And luckily, when that story went out, the world's press and media got onto that, and some of the more respectable mountaineering teams, I mean, even they condemned what had actually happened there. That if anything, the north side of Everest is extremely difficult to get somebody down from. On the south side through Nepal, to an extent, it's possible to rescue somebody. You can get somebody roped up and you can short rope them down the mountain to a point where potentially a helicopter could drop a long line and you could be down off Everest and back in a hotel in Kathmandu within hours. On the north side of Everest, you don't have that, and it's a much, much more technically difficult, more rocky terrain up on that side of the mountain. And the CMA, the Chinese Mountaineering Association, do not allow rescue helicopters to fly through the valley and up onto the mountain. So if you get into trouble on the north side of Everest, I think you're pretty much may as well be on the moon in terms of trying to get you down off the mountain. So it's a much more difficult proposition. And I think, unfortunately, that's probably a little bit of what played out in 2006. There was nothing that they could do to physically get this person down.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the criticism was that even just to sit and just to, stay with this person and hold their hand and talk to them, or just to step over somebody, I think is just harsh. It's just, in the utmost. Luckily, that there's not really been much more of that since on Everest. I think, it's just one of those things. It's individual cases on the mountain that you just don't know how you will deal with it until you're put into that position. And we're trying to make it safer. The guiding companies out there, nobody knows what the answer is. Regulating the mountain, getting the crowds less, knowing when to go, knowing the right times to sit and hold and wait. I mean, luckily, that the mountain's got a lot safer over the last several years, that's for sure. As we have advancements in clothing and weather forecasting, so things are getting better from that point of view.
Sure.
To hopefully eliminate possibilities of having some stranded climbers on the mountain where you are just walking over these guys.
So I also saw, it's a really famous picture now of what looked like 1,000 people lined up, butt to belly button, waiting for hours for their chance to get to the summit. And I know you talked about it a little bit earlier, how it is really starting to get to the point where a lot of these maybe lesser tour groups will kind of undercut and charge a little bit less and throw some inexperienced people up there. Has the process become too commercial? Has it have the risks with trying to shuttle that many people up to the top? Is that just adding to the inherent danger of the process?
I think you have to admit that there is an element to that. I think the mountain's become a victim of its own success. It's a cash cow for the Nepalese government. They see Everest as being the jewel in their crown. They issued record numbers of permits in 2019 to Western climbers because it's profitable for them, and that number is set to continue. Everest is its popularity is not on the wane. If anything, it's becoming more and more popular. Ironically, the likes of Into Thin Air, which is pretty much a negative portrayal of commercial mountaineering as it was beginning on Everest, it did the opposite effect. It made it more popular. More people wanted to go to the mountain. Just the same way this big Hollywood movie came out, which was documented the 96 expedition. People will have seen that and thought, hey, I want to go to Everest. This looks great. And
it had the opposite. It had completely the opposite impact on me. I saw it and it's like, wow, why the hell would anybody want to do that? So I wanted to talk to somebody who that is their goal and that is what they want to do to hope, believe me, I moved from Ohio to Florida because I didn't like being cold in the winter, so beyond everything else, that to me said, wow, you're putting yourself in that position. What is the allure? And so go ahead.
It's, as humans, it's crazy. After the earthquake in Nepal of 2015, so there's 22 people directly down at Everest Base Camp are killed as a result of the earthquake and the subsequent avalanches that came through. In 2016, there was record permit applications for Everest on the south side. So a year after the events of 2015, more people than ever wanted to go and climb that mountain from the south side. So, you go figure that. I can't work that one out myself personally, but this is what happens. It's the world is a smaller place. Everybody is a journalist these days. We have you can follow an Everest expedition to the infinite degree now on Snapchat, Instagram. Everybody's sharing pictures from every aspect, and it's making everything more attainable. And people are seeing this and are wanting to buy into this bigger picture. So the numbers are going up. It's more people are going, more companies are setting guiding companies up. You have situations where you have Nepali Sherpas who've been employees on Western guided expeditions who've maybe now summited Everest 10 times, who now deem themselves qualified enough to start their own Everest guiding companies to try and recruit, Western climbers, Indian climbers. That's adding to the mix of humanity and sheer numbers of people that are going up onto the mountain. I mean, over 800 people summited the peak last year on a very, very short amount of time, which led to those queues and led to the problems that we saw. Generally, on an Everest season, you might have 11 days of clear weather during a weather window opportunity when the jet stream gets pushed off. That didn't happen quite the way they'd hoped in 2019. So you had effectively 400 climbers trying to reach the summit of the mountain in a 48-hour period, which clearly leads to problems. That there's no getting away from that.
And you have essentially maybe 2 routes in and out?
Yeah, on the south side, you've pretty much got one. The Southeast Ridge route, when you go to climb Everest through Nepal, is the stairway to the top effectively. So you've got one way up and pretty much one way down. I mean, there's bottlenecks galore when you get higher in the mountain,
right?
Because you get traffic jams, and it's I mean, what you see is the dark side of the mountain, but it can be managed and it can be policed, and that doesn't have to happen. And that's what the teams have got to get together and work out the answers to that, and how you solve that problem of too many people up there at the same time, all using the same infrastructure, the same logistics, kept into the same climbing ropes. And it's as a climber, as an Everest climber myself, it's a problem. But nobody's coming forward to say what the rightful answers are here to solve this, because it's Everest, it's big business, it's the highest point on the planet, and everybody wants to. Well, it seems as though these days everybody wants to experience that. So yeah, it's a problem. It is a problem.
So I just have a couple more questions here. So you just kind of talked maybe a little bit to it, but the title of your book is Everest, It's Not About the Summit. What is it then about? I mean, I know, like I said, you talked a little bit about it already.
Yeah.
But
I mean, just to give some context for the book, I mean, I had no intentions of writing anything to do with my attempts to go to Everest. It was purely just because it was an accidental book in many ways, because of the events that I was caught up in. So being there in 2014 and obviously witnessing the political fallout of being on an Everest expedition, that was an Everest expedition that was stopped in its tracks, which was an unprecedented event. These sort of events on the mountain had never happened before. So most people would talk about a successful climb of the mountain, or perhaps in the situation of 96 where you had that disaster and people wanted to know about that. But ultimately, people still climbed through the storm and were successful in summiting the mountain. That didn't happen in 2014, so that was a very unique event where nobody stepped foot on the summit. To then return, obviously, in 2015 and have an even bigger event happen.
Right.
It just lent itself to I think a story of adversity, and it's not always about reaching the summit. Sometimes you can go to these mountains and they do bite back, and they don't let you reach the top. And I think I wanted to obviously personally write about my own experiences of getting to the mountain and what I actually went through to raise the funds to go to Everest. But obviously the events that played out for me, so those 2 years of adversity, of tragedy on the mountain, and showing, I just wanted to get the story out there that it isn't about the summit really. It doesn't have to always end up being, that glorious picture of somebody stood on the top of the mountain. I mean, obviously, when I went out to Everest, that's the aim. You obviously want to climb the mountain, but while you're there, I think, and it's the whole journey for me. It's the experience that you have of getting to the mountain in the first place. In many cases, it was a lot harder than actually climbing the mountain because of the fundraising hurdles that you have to overcome. So it's a big journey. And coming home in 2015, it slowly started dawning on me that actually there is more to going out to these mountains than just climbing them. Because tragedies like this can happen. It just, it changes everything. It changes the political landscape. It changes the way that media portray the mountain. Just everything changed. And yeah, I think I wanted to write a story that just sort of told that story, really, that, you know, that just to put out there that it's not about that overall glory of you know, conquering a mountain as it is. There's a lot more at play, and it's that whole iceberg analogy of everybody only really sees the top part of an iceberg, but what you don't see is everything at play underneath that. And for me, that's what my book did. It sort of showed what lies underneath the sea, really, parts of you know, the turmoil it places on your family, the hardship of fundraising, you know, and that sometimes is worth so much more than actually what it takes to actually get to stand on top of the mountain. So that's why the book is called what it is, because for me it wasn't about the summit. It was so much more than just standing on that little bit of snow, 29,000 feet up.
So it wasn't about the summit, but you're going back again for the third time. So what about what will go differently this time? Let's say, you know, barring the summit, which is obviously the goal, what would happen that would you'd say, you know what, I've accomplished what I want, and I don't need to try again for a fourth time? What would it take? Right.
I think, well, I mean, it's not. Firstly, I will say it's not given that I'll be going back next year. I am still undertaking. That there's a fundraising element of that ongoing at the moment. So it isn't a given that I will go back. If I do go back, I mean, I do get asked this question quite a lot, actually. Then isn't it a bit hypocritical? Because your book is saying it's not about the summit. So why go back if it's not about the summit? And I think for me, ultimately, it comes down to wanting to go to this mountain and do the best of my ability under my own steam as it is, and not have anything derail from that. So not have anything stop me in my tracks, you know, not have anything come along that would prevent me from getting as high on the mountain as I'm able to. And I want that decision to be ultimately down to me. So if I am struggling on the mountain, then I can know that I've reached my limits, and it's nothing that stopped me from going much higher. So the dream was always to push myself. It's just that human challenge, that physical thing of seeing how far you can take this. I don't know if I'll go back next year and reach. If I do go back next year and reach the summit, maybe I will, maybe I won't. But as long as I can go back and be true to myself and give it the best of my ability, and know that I tried my best and I pushed it as far as I could, then that's the point where I'd be comfortable. That's the point where I can accept that. But I think when you've had two events that stopped you, that's been outside of your own control, as what happened to me, it's that notion of what if. It's, you know, not knowing how much further you could have pushed it, how much further up this mountain you could potentially have got towards achieving that life goal you'd set yourself. There's no guarantees in life, but
yeah, I totally respect what you're saying there. I mean, completely. I can totally get behind wanting to make sure if you turn around and come back down, it's because you decided to do it, not because of an earthquake or an avalanche. It was you decided, okay, that's enough, and you were able to turn around. I can get behind that. So my last question is, how have these past experiences, 2014, 2015, how have they changed you, or have they changed you? Are you a different person now than you were after or were before 2015?
I mean, I've tried to not let the mountain define my life in many ways, and define who I am as a person. But I think you can't really go through the experiences of what happened. Definitely more so in 2015, because I was completely and utterly caught up in it.
Right.
And I think it's very hard to not go through something like that, not to have it affect you, and not to have it, alter aspects of your life. I mean, for me, particularly because the book that I wrote did very well over here in the UK, and I wasn't expecting that. I think I wrote the book as a kind of like as a cathartic process. It was for about 6 months coming home from Everest in 2015. I didn't want to talk about what happened to anybody. I kind of sort of shut myself down a little bit, and I found writing the book was quite helpful in terms of putting down everything that had actually happened. But then the book, as I say, became quite popular over here. A lot of people started buying it, and I was getting a lot of positivity because of the book, and a lot of people were commenting and saying it's great that you've shown us that we can all go after our own Everests in life, and it doesn't matter if we achieve it. It's just the getting up off our sofa and giving it a go. That's what it's all about in life. So there's an element of that kicked in as a result of writing the book, and it was great for me because I pretty much, I became somebody who became quite not popular, but because of being an Everest climber who didn't reach the summit, it was an inspirational. It became this inspirational thing where people wanted to know about it. And I think as Brits, we tend to revel in failure a little bit. We look at Shackleton and these sort of, and Captain Scott, and we see failure as being a big thing, really, in many ways. That's there to be revered and accepted. And my story just added into that. I think it fueled into that. I think it let the average person know that it's okay to fail, it's okay to do these things, and it's not always about the achievement of that. So I think that's defined me in a way. The book over the last few years, it's allowed that to happen in many ways. I get lovely comments from people from all walks of life, from all over the planet, really, saying that they'd read my book and how it changed them in a little way, and that's been really nice. And if the Everest expeditions that I've had have led to one thing, it's been that, and it's been lovely to receive such a level of feedback of people to say that it's great to know that I don't have to achieve as long as I just try. And I think that's the message that came out from the book. I think that's the one thing that's left on me, really.
Sure.
So it's defined me from that kind of way.
Well, I can get behind that too. Thank you so much, Ellis, for joining the show today and answering a lot of the questions I had. Like I said, I've been obsessing about it personally, and I did want to just kind of get an idea from somebody who's been there and somebody who's tried that and has tried it again and is still trying it again. And I wanted to get a sense of, that kind of person and that, what was, the mentality of I'm going to continue to effort. And so you really did that for me, and I appreciate that very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Absolutely welcome, Pete.
You are in the process right now of funding, right? Of trying to mine for some funds to help for that 2020 campaign. Would you like to spend another moment just to let the listeners know out there, what you're doing right now to drum up some funds that could help you with 2020?
Yeah, I'm absolutely. Off my website, all the information as to why I'm looking to go back to the mountain is there. The whole backstory is to the two previous expeditions, and I'm at the moment, I think I'm one of these people who I don't like to just go around asking for donations, because this is kind of my goal. So it's something that I should work towards myself. And that's kind of the way I look at it. I was able to fund the previous two expeditions largely due to the sort of initiatives that I was able to come up with. And it's exactly the same process for 2020, really. So I'm out there, any type of public speaking that I'm doing, any time of book talks I'm doing, I'm earning the money, I guess, to siphon off to one side to allow myself to go back to the mountain. And if something comes from that, if some company comes and sees what I'm doing and wants to get involved, that's absolutely great. The thing in this day and age, it's very, very difficult to attract any level of corporate sponsorship for something such as Everest, because it has become, as you picked up on, very commercial these days. It's nothing new. So unfortunately, it doesn't really attract that level of interest. So it's hard to overcome. I think sponsorship on a mountain like Everest is dead in the water, really. So for somebody like myself, you have to think outside the box, and you've got to get creative as to how you do that. And it's, as I said, it's my goal. So I'm of the firm opinion that I need to, to make those sacrifices and put myself in that position to try and raise that money in any way I can.
Sure. You also have merchandise. Yeah. You have merchandise as well, don't you, on the website? So those are some options, right? You have some definite some shirts and caps, merchandise on the website. Obviously, go ahead and buy the book, Everest. It's not about the summit.
Yeah.
Mr. Ellis Stewart's journey. Again, thank you very much. I really appreciate that, and I hope to talk to you again in, what would that be, maybe June of 2020, when you've summited and you come back and you can tell me about it.
I'd love to, Pete. I'd absolutely love to.
That'd be fantastic. I would appreciate it. Thank you so much, Ellis.
Great.
And we'll hope to talk to you again soon.
Yeah, okay. No problem at all. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So once again, Ellis Stewart, he is working his way for attempt number 3 to climb Mount Everest. And I think we got a good understanding there. At least it helped me get an understanding of what's going on in the brain when, you try it the first time. I mean, I guess you could try it the first time, and the first time there is a catastrophe that shuts down the mountain forever for that particular year. Year 2 comes, and you are part of an earthquake that maroons you for 48 hours at 20,000 feet on the side of a mountain, and you kind of get a real good look at your own mortality in the face there for a moment. What is the mentality that makes you want to go back? And I think he said it very clearly there, that it's just a matter of, if I turn around and come back down the mountain, it's because I chose to do it. It wasn't because there was some natural catastrophe that forced my hand. And I totally respect that. And so again, if you're interested in helping Ellis Stewart in his goal to make it to the summit of Mount Everest for 2020, next upcoming year, you can do so. You can find out on his website. It's everest-dream.com, everest-dream.com. And you can buy merchandise there. And also you can purchase his book on Amazon. It's titled Everest. It's not about the summit. What do you think? What are your thoughts? Would you be interested in trying to climb Mount Everest? To me, there's a sense of romance to it, but I think in practice, spending 6 to 8 weeks on the side of a mountain, it doesn't really hold a lot of allure to me. Then to put yourself in a position where you may end up, dying. It may be something that you don't make it off the mountain. There are 300 people who went up with that goal and never came back. At least 300 bodies. There are more than that. So for me, it's probably a no-go. What do you think? If you want to drop us a line, you can contact us through our email page. It is provemerongcast@gmail.com. You can also leave us a message on Facebook. Just look for Prove Me Wrong. That's the name of the Facebook page. You can also contact us on Instagram, still Prove Me Wrong. Or if you're just looking for content, if you're just looking for ways to hear the podcast, you can find us really on any app that plays podcasts. So iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Tunein Radio, any of those things, you can find the Prove Me Wrong podcast, and all of our episodes will be there. Also, we are on YouTube now as well. You can like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you'll get notifications when new videos come up. So let me finish then tonight with saying that this episode of the Prove Me Wrong podcast is brought to you by ZendoZones citronella burners from JT Eaton. They are shaped like little tiki gods, so let Sturf and Stan, Hawaiian Howie, and Luau Lily bring the islands to your backyard with ZendoZones citronella burners. ZendoZones uses natural 3% citronella candles and incense cones, and they're perfect for patios, decks, backyards, campsites, poolside, base camps, and more. You can enjoy the outdoors again. So you can pick them up on Amazon or at Ace Hardware, and go ahead and collect them all today. So once again, for my guest, Ellis J Stewart, the author of Everest, It's Not About the Summit. Thank you once again for joining the Prove Me Wrong podcast, and we'll talk to you again soon.